always gotten this right, and we continue to struggle with loving your neighbor. The way that maybe is depicted in the Word, do we really understand what it means to love your neighbor as yourself? I find that the church a lot of times does church very, very well. And this is not all churches, but as a whole and around is that we do church pretty well. You can talk to one of my local churches here in Cleveland, and they'll say, you know what, we do church really well. We got great worship, we got the drums, we got the preach really well. And he's right. They do church really well. And he says, well, Paul, we struggle with being the church. It's good for being the church. I have found is if we really begin to understand and hold on to what it means to love your neighbor, it's a very simple way, but it has big dividends. It can change the world. It's crazy because we were talking about a statistic last night that people are no longer running to the church anymore. They're not coming in the doors by droves. I have a pastor in the city of Cleveland who goes, Paul, I dream of the day when people are lining up to come to church to hear me preach. I'm like, brother, they're not going to. He's not a good man, but people just aren't doing it. Now there's pastors that are gathering together and looking at statistics right now, and they're trying to figure out this new phenomenon that's going on, is that people don't even come to church regularly after Sunday. They usually say, you know what, I'm probably going to come just 2 Sundays a week, or Sundays a month. And churches are having to figure out how they do programming to figure out the people that only come 2 times a week. And if you're one of those people, I'm not here to bash you. I'm just saying this is what's happening around the U.S. But people aren't running the church anymore. And so we have to begin to look at something maybe a little bit different of how do we meet our neighbor where they're at. If you look there in Luke 10, chapter 10, verse 25, this is what it says. And behold, a lawyer stood up to put him to the test, saying, Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? He said to him, What is in the written law? How do you read it? And he answered, You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. And he said to him, You have answered correctly. Do this, and you will live. But he, desiring to justify himself, said to Jesus, And who is my neighbor? Who is my neighbor? Lord, I pray as we dive into what it means to love your neighbor, or even the art of loving your neighbor, may you clearly speak. Lord, I don't want to get in the way. It's a message you continue to bring up to me all the time. What does it mean to love your neighbor? So Lord, I pray that you will speak clearly through your word. And we ask all these things in your precious name. Amen. I'm not going to read the whole passage this morning. You know, some of you guys know this story. But the question of your soul with all your mind and all your strength. And you should love your neighbor as yourself. And the question reveals, because we know the lawyer here is not really trying to figure out how much more he can do something. He's really just trying to trip up Jesus. So we see right now at the very beginning of this, he reveals a self-righteous spirit in this lawyer. And he challenges Jesus because he says, oh yeah, you answered correctly. Do this and you will live. And the lawyer's response is, but who is my neighbor, Jesus? Who is my neighbor? And he's probably thinking, okay, Jesus is going to back down. But Jesus, let me explain to you what's going on. And so another part of the context going on here is we see there's this road. This is the road between and going down from Jerusalem to Jericho. It's important to this story because of what was going on with people that were coming out of Jerusalem. You understand that Jerusalem was a place of worship. It was a cleansing place for leaders of the church and for the priests. People that were ministering in Jericho, they would go to Jerusalem to meet. And to go to Jerusalem to... It's also a place where people just came for very different reasons, to buy things, to do those kind of things. So there was a sense of they had to go to Jerusalem. And that'll come into play here in a moment as I share some of the characters in this story. But it's also important to understand that the social structure that was happening in place there in that context. A social structure that in the middle of all the big circles, we want to call it, draw a big bullseye. The center of that being that there was the priest. Those were the people that were looked up to. They were the ones they were the man. We got to trust him. Then you have the Levites, who were like the Jewish spiritual leaders of the Jewish people. Then you go out one more ring, and then you find the Jewish people. And then outside the next ring, you have the sinners and the outcasts. And then you go to the next ring, and then you find the Samaritans. The people that were not valued, that were not looked at as being God's people, that were sometimes labeled as being dirty people. And then the further ring out, you go out and you have the Gentiles. So you have this group of people that would call them followers of God. They have their leaders, and this is kind of social structure. And I would even venture to go out and say, hey, what does our social structure look like in the church, or even in our world today? We would say probably today still the pastors are kind of the man. Some churches have gone away, they have more of a preaching team, and it's not just one guy. Because we always say that. We always say it's not always the pastor's responsibility to win people for Christ. But we still kind of operate in that way. The pastor kind of leads the charge. And then we have the elders and the leaders of the church. And then we have, most of the time, it's usually the same ethnic group around in our Christian organizations most of the time. And then you have the sinners and the outcasts within our ethnic group. We still continue to work with all of those. And then we go out to the next ring. It's a different ethnic group of people that we have a hard time getting out to. The different political group. Being Democrat, Republican. Sometimes in churches we don't always hang out with those types of people that don't agree with us. Then you even go down to the different religions. And then we can keep going out. It's a sexual orientation. That's kind of our structure, right? So it's somewhat similar to what was going on, but we have some of that social structure that's going on. Why is that important? Because the lawyer asked, who is my neighbor? And as Jesus begins to go into this story, we understand that there's a guy outside the city there on the road there. He was attacked by robbers. He was not only robbed, he was beaten up and left half dead. And the story goes along is that there were some people that came along. There were some priests and then there were Levites that would come by and they did not help him. Then you have a Samaritan that came and he did help him. But it's encouraging, it's crazy to understand as we look at the robbers, and we know we don't know his whole story, what his life was about. But I would tend to think of, what does the robber represent today? There's robbers in life today. They're not, maybe not the physical robber that's going to come and attack you, but maybe it's just life in general that robs us and leaves us beaten up. Maybe it's our family history. You grew up in a family that has not had a good structure. It wasn't the way that God designed family to be. Impact of sin robs people. And unfortunately, in many situations, the church has robbed people. And so you're left, we understand as we look at this victim is left broken, just like we are left broken many times. Life has broken us. Sin has broken us. The impact of sin, family history, the church has broken us. It's beat us up. We have soul baggage. We can't even hardly connect with Jesus because we got so much junk in our suitcase. Then we have a group of impoverished people, which I mean all of us. We all lack something. So we are the victim in this story. We and the people that you go outside of these walls and they are your neighbor. They're all those people. They've been beaten up. Life has hurt them. And what's crazy is then you have these religious people that we look up to. The people that we think that should always do the right thing. Especially in the story, the priests and Levites. And what their response was, is they didn't just walk past the victim, but they walked on the other side of the road to go by. Now we understand that in that culture, the priests and the spiritual leaders, they were always cautioned to work with, to be able to touch dead people because that would make them unclean again. They had to go back to Jerusalem. But the crazy thing is that these guys were coming from Jerusalem. They had been with God. They'd been worshiping with God. They were singing the songs. They were doing all those things they were supposed to do. And they were leaving Jerusalem. And they walked on the other side of the road. You don't know how many people that come to our city and they ride down the road and they don't wait. They wait until they get right in front of somebody to lock the door. I'm like, why'd you lock the door? Oh, it's a bad part of town. I'm like, we've been in the bad part of town for the past 5 minutes. Well, it's that guy. I'm like, what guy? The black guy. Sitting in a shawarma shop the other day with one of my friends that's from Garrisville, Ohio. And he goes, these people are infidels. Should we worry? What the heck, man? This is my friend. But if we're honest, we have those thoughts. We walk on the other side of the road because we don't want to mess with that. That can cramp our style. It make us look bad, make us look weird. It's like we're still in junior high. I feel like we never leave junior high. Right? I'm not messing with that guy. But we see this here, that the people that the society looked up to, they're the ones that should have stopped. Well, and then enter the Samaritans. In my glorified imagination, this is not biblical. We don't know exactly when Jesus met the woman at the well, but I like to think in my mind that this is a response to what happened in Samaria. That this Samaritan was a part of the woman at the well coming back to share the story about who Jesus was. You remember her story? She was changed because she was with Jesus, and she couldn't help it. When she was the prostitute, she was the one that had 5 husbands at one time over her lifespan. Jesus figured it out, said, hey, go, I love you, I restore you, you have a new identity, you go back and do your thing. And she goes back to her neighborhood, the people that she said never liked me. I had to go sneak out. And she told them about Jesus, and it says, people came to know Jesus, and he went and hung out with the Samaritans. So it's really fun to me, in my glorified imagination, is, again, that maybe this is the revelation of some people that have been with Jesus. The righteous man steps up to the plate. He doesn't only go on the same side of the road, but he goes to him. We see a man in the very beginning. If you're taking notes this morning, I'm sorry I don't have slides. I heard that you're a slide church, but I'm not. It's hard for me to be contained by slides. But how you love your neighbor. This is our point. How you love your neighbor. Number one, it's good to understand that we don't get to choose our neighbor. You don't get to choose your neighbor. If we really believe, Genesis 1:27, that we are all made in the image of God, that means everybody is our neighbor. Everybody's our neighbor. It doesn't matter your skin color. It doesn't matter your religious beliefs. It doesn't matter if you like boys or if you like girls, if the sexual orientation is different than others. It doesn't matter if they have sin issues. Your neighbor is your neighbor. And some people say, Paul, what about your enemies? Well, you know what? Jesus said something like that in Matthew 5:44. You should what? Love your enemies. Our neighbors, we don't get to choose. And there are some times, if I'm honest, I wish I could choose my neighbors. But we can't choose our neighbors. As we see the righteous man, the Samaritan, move, the next point is that on the way how you love your neighbor is that you have to move towards people. You look at verse 33 and 34. And the very first one, verse 34, says, he came to where he was at. He didn't walk on the other side of the road. He came to where he was at. He was in the same vicinity of this guy. He went to him. As we look at this story, we have to understand that we have to put ourselves where people are at. That means in your neighborhood. That means at the restaurant. That means the person that you don't really like very much, but you know that God's calling you to go talk to that person. You've got to actually step towards them. Because the majority of the time, people are not going to move towards you. Right. Somebody always said to me one time, he goes, hey, if you don't have friends, it's your fault. I'm like, what? I'm a good dude. Have you ever asked somebody to be your friend? No, that's weird. So if we're all sitting around here going, I can't love my neighbor. They're not coming to me. Well, they're not going to come. You have to move towards people. There's a church that I get a chance to work with. It's one of our partner churches, and In some of these places, they have to have fences around their property because of dumping and because of things that happen and prostitution and stuff like that. So you can imagine a church that used to be an old machine shop. They have a large piece of property behind it that's used for gardening and that we're doing right now. But it's got a fence around it. On the left side of the building is a prostitute hotel, literally. It's a long string of a motel, and it's all prostitutes. That's where they do all their work there. The pimps sit up on the other side of the hill and they watch what's going on. And so they've been doing a number of outreach activities, but they've always done it inside the fence. In that community, people have a hard time coming through the fence. Because the fence represents shame. And so I went to the pastor, and we do these things called jump outs. The group was able to be a part of one of these. But we show up in a community, and we bring a big 4-foot grill, and we serve hot dogs, and all we do is just hang out and love on people. And what's crazy is that the churches we do it with, we say, hey, you know what? We have a couple things that we would rather you not do, and this is what we want you to do. And I said, for one thing, we're not going to do the jump out inside your fence. We have to go outside the fence. Okay, all right, we can do that, I think. I think we're okay with that. A couple of ladies are like, no, you know what's out there? Yes, I know what's out there. Oh, okay, Pastor Paul. We're going to bring our tracks and everything. Nope, can't bring your tracks. And if you don't know what a track is, it's one of those little booklets you find on the side of the road that tells you how to find Jesus. Not bad. But at this moment, I don't want them to have an agenda. I just want them to go listen to the story. I want them to move towards people without an agenda. And so the pastor's like, okay, Paul, we're going to trust you. You haven't let us down yet. I'm like, okay, no problem. So we show up, and they got some chairs out, and we started serving food. By the end of that 2 hours, we had over 150 people show up. Over half of them stayed and ate with us. The prostitutes that would never come through the fence were all eating food with us. And they're telling their story of how they got to where they were going. Much easier to have compassion for people when you know their story. And so now he's like, Paul, when are we doing the next jump out? I got another place in town. You have to move towards people because they're not always going to come to you. Whether it's a church or whether it's even your house. As you move towards people, we understand that we look at this Samaritan man, that is that he had compassion for the victim. I don't know about you, but I don't always have compassion for my neighbor. Sometimes it's an annoyance. Like you just woke me up. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. You've been drinking all night, and you're screaming at your girlfriend, I just want to go to sleep. And he's trying to bum me for a cigarette. I don't smoke. But he's trying to bum a cigarette for me at 8 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, dude, you kept me up all night. But as I began to hear Mark's story, and I began to say, you know what, I'm already up. I already got my daughter on the bus. I'm sitting there waiting. He's like, I need to sell something to you. Would you buy some DVDs and DVD player? I'm like, where are they from? Because I'm already thinking, in my preconceived ideas, you must have stole these things. But Mark said, hey, me and Katie, we broke up. We don't get along anymore. I'm like, yeah, I know. I heard about it all last night. And so I'm like, he's like, how much you want? He goes, I need $25. I'm going to get a haircut. I need a pack of smokes. I got to have a job in it every day. Like, okay. And I had $25 in my pocket. So I'm like, nope. I'm just going to go back inside. My wife's like peeking through the window to see what I'm doing. Come back in the house, and I'm like, what does Mark want? I'm like, Mark wants to sell me these DVDs. And the DVD player, she's like, you're not going to buy them, are you? I'm like, I really feel like God wants me to buy the DVDs. She goes, you know they're not going to be good. And she was right. I gave them all away. But the Lord, as I proposed Mark, he said, Mark, come back over here and I'll buy the DVDs. He's like, really? Really? I'm like, yeah, I'll buy it. I said, before I give you the money, can I pray for you? And I'm sitting there arguing with God the whole time. I don't know if you guys ever have this conversation where God's telling you to do something. I'm like, God, I don't have anything nice to say and pray for this man. He's like, just start talking. And I began to pray for Mark. And things came out of my mouth that I was like, that's Jesus. Bless Mark. Help him to know that he is valued, that he's made in your image. Pray for him to get a job. I just prayed for this man, and I got done praying, and I look up, and Mark's got big tears. Like, he goes, Paul, nobody's ever said those kind of things. Never. He goes, people don't realize that I got hooked on painkillers about a year ago when I fell off a scaffold. And I can't stop doing pills. Now, I could have compassion for Mark. Because I listened to his story. We have to be a good listener. Being a good listener will give us direction on how we're going to love that neighbor. Have a posture of learning. Understand that we have to sit and listen and learn what's going on. I shared about a lady named Anita. Just on Friday, I found a whole other depth of her life. I've been living with her for 3.5 years, living life with her. I so badly want her to be free and to run and dance with Jesus. But she's just not ready yet. But I heard another depth of her story, and she's got tears in her eyes. And I was able to find the first time to be able to share clearly the gospel in her life. And even in a dream that she had when she was 26, she's over 60 now, was a time where God was speaking to her very clearly, and for the first time she had clarity. And some of you guys are going, I don't like to wait 3.5 years. I'll tell you, I am a task-driven guy. I want to get things done. I am confident that Jesus is going to rescue Nina's heart. Not because of what I'm doing, but because I'm listening and waiting on Jesus to tell me how to move. We have to stop and listen. You may have a good answer or an action, but it may not be what the Holy Spirit is directing. You have to be able to listen to people. The next point of how to love your neighbor, and then we see the Samaritan, is that he cared for the victim. We have to care for our neighbors. The thing is, I wish it was always convenient or easy. But a lot of times, I feel like God puts us in places where it's really hard. And it's messy. Because we're dealing with people. But we see this example here, as Jesus shares the example, is that this man did whatever it took. He pulled all of his supplies out of his pouch and he started putting oil and started bandaging it up. And then he just took care of him. And what's crazy, it was just very practical care. So many times in ministry, we think we got to do the best program, or we got to figure it out. We got to have the right time, the right lighting, and the right mood. But this was just practical stuff. The guy needed a bandage. He needed to be wrapped up and taken care of, and he did practical things. So you and I, we can find practical things to do. One of the craziest things, I never thought about this until a church in Willard, Ohio, their youth group said, hey, can we make homeless bags for you? I'm like, what do you mean? Like, we're going to put some pair of gloves, a sock hat, some snacks, and a bus pass. $5 bus pass. And could you guys use those as you meet people around and as you're driving? And I'm like, sure, look, we can try it. I've given 15 away in the past 2 weeks. And the surprise on people's faces is that this guy just needed a bus pass. Hey, there happens to be a bus pass in there. This one guy just shivering the whole time in Cleveland in this cold weather. He puts a hat on, he puts the gloves on. And it's crazy because in that pouch, they written personal cards to these people and tell them that they love them, and they pray for them. We don't know your name, but we're going to pray for you. Practical. Or even the way of some of you guys, I'm a walkie-talkie guy. I love walkie-talkies. I heard a story of a guy by Bob Goff, writes a book called Love Always. And he went out and he bought a house, and they lived there for a little while, and they said, you know what? Let's sell this house and move across the street. But we're going to be very intentional on who we want to move in this house. Because we're going to love them as much as we possibly can. So they took applications for their house. And so a lady, a single lady moved in. She had lost her husband, and she moved in. And they just began to do life with her. And about 2 or 3 years into their relationship, she got cancer. She was afraid. So Bob Goff went and bought her a walkie-talkie. And he had one on his nightstand. And so every night, him and his wife would call in. Hey, how are you doing tonight? How was your day? I don't know about you, that's pretty fun. But what if you go out and find your neighbor and hey, here's a walkie-talkie. Make sure it's always on. We'll make sure you're doing okay. How fun would it be if our whole neighborhoods had walkie-talkies? We'd be connected. Hey, how's it going? Some of you are like, no, we don't want to give my neighbor a walkie-talkie. But it's a practical way to learn somebody's story. And so through the rest of her life, which is not very long, even down to her last breath, she felt loved because she was connected. Or maybe you're like one of my friends in the city of Cleveland that say, you know what, I have this empty garage, and all these homeless people keep getting kicked off of the corner. I'm just going to open up my garage and they can live here for the winter. Whoa. Like, where do they go to the bathroom? He's like, they got buckets and they clean them out, but they can stay in my garage. Now, it's just as practical. It could be as easy as going, hey, how are you doing today? And the next point is that we see the Samaritan is that it cost him to love his neighbor. If I were to stand up here and tell you this is all easy and that we should all do it, the thing is that we should all do it because Jesus commands it. But it is hard. It's going to cost us something. We know this guy, he didn't just stop with the bandaging him up and that stuff. He actually picked him up and took him to the inn. And what's crazy is that I'm pretty sure the innkeeper was a Jewish person. Right? So it's already going to cost him an argument right now. What are you doing helping this guy? But he doesn't just say, take care of him. He says, take care of him, and whatever he needs, I'll pay for it. And if it's not enough that I'm going to give you right now, I'm going to be coming back through here. I'll make sure to continue to pay whatever he needs. Church, people are messy. We have to be in it for the long haul. We can't just wake up one day and say, no, I'm not going to love my neighbor anymore. We have to be in it for the long haul. And a lot of times it costs us a lot. It costs us our time. It's crazy. There's a guy named Shane that I had an opportunity to work with. And he was one of these guys that as I moved closer to him, he was a guy that I would not want to give my phone number to. But, of course, the pastor that I partnered with gave him my phone number. And so Shane would just call me randomly. Sometimes when he was drunk, sometimes when he wasn't. It cost me because it cost me my time. But what I learned about Shane is that Shane was a guy that grew up in a very broken home. He walked in on his dad molesting his sister and went to go stop it, and his dad stabbed him in the leg twice. He has a reason to drink a lot. But it cost me my time. It cost me my frustration. It even cost me money. And it even cost me a little bit of my reputation. Because if you ever have a guy that doesn't really know Jesus very well, and he rides in the car with me, all right? And in Cleveland, people don't drive very well. And people step out in front of traffic and things like that. I didn't have to have a horn with Shane. Shane is the guy who would say, get out of the way, mother! Shane, I don't need you to say those things. It's okay. But Shane, I think, moved closer to Jesus. Not because of what I was doing, but just because I was willing and available. And I said, you know what? Shane's worth the cost. It costs us a lot. And so this morning, I know I've gone a little over this morning. But to conclude is that the lawyer asked this question, who is my neighbor? What he was really trying to get to is that he was asking who and how much should I love my neighbor? But Jesus changes the question and makes the neighbor the subject. And so as we should do the same. Love does not ask how far do I have to go. Love asks what can I do? Love does not ask how far do I have to go, but it asks what can I do? Loving your neighbor. When you love your neighbor, and again, I do not think that you can do this outside of loving God with all your heart, soul, and mind. But a direct impact and direct outflow of loving God with all your heart, soul, and mind is that you love your neighbor. And so the way that you love your neighbor shows your relationship with God. And unfortunately, I believe the church has had so many opportunities to love their neighbor outside the walls. But we continue to go and worship God. And we walk out and we go back down to Jericho to our real lives. And we pass by all the people. How you love your neighbor shows your relationship with God. And what's crazy, I said at that point in the very beginning, is that I think when people really love their neighbor well, it can change a neighborhood. It can change a city. And what's crazy is it's contagious. You guys, many of you know Denise Manchester. I think her and Jim came here and spoke last year. And she shared a story a couple weeks ago, is that she teaches English, and she has a number of students that come in that don't have a whole lot of anything. And we charge money for our English books just because it's a buy-in thing. And she'd been working with a widow for a long time. She's been working with a widow for a while now. And not just doing English, but just doing life with her, loving on her. And this one night, they were sitting here doing English, and they have a new student. And like, you need to have a book. He's like, I don't have any money. And the widow reached inside of her pocketbook and pulled out her last $5 and gave it to him. And then after, Denise goes, why did you do this? She goes, you guys have loved me so well. I couldn't help from him because he needs to have English. It's contagious. You may be here going, oh, Paul, I'm all for this. But I may be the only person in this room that will do it. Do it. It's contagious. You cannot wait for the world to come in here. We have to go where they're at. And we all spend a lot more time out there than we do in here. Amen? Take Jesus where they're at. Love your neighbor. Lord, we thank you for this morning. Thank you, Countersport, for your patience and your grace for letting me speak a little bit longer than usual. But Lord, we want to be a people that love you with all of our heart, soul, and mind, and we want to love people. No matter what they look like, no matter what religion they are, no matter what political party they stand for, but we want to love our neighbor. Some of us in here may be going, yeah, this is exciting, this is good, I want to be a part of that. And some people are going, yeah, that's cool, but I am scared. Help us to be people that love you so hard and so deeply that our output is loving people. May Countersport be different because people got serious about loving God and loving you. May you use your word and continue to empower us. May we not be like those that will leave Jerusalem this morning and walk past people and back to our lives. Give us opportunities, and may we take hold of those opportunities to love our neighbor. And so I see you in your precious name.